Was ist Innovation und woher kommt sie? Wie wird ein Geistesblitz zu einer Handlung, nimmt Gestalt an und verändert die Gesellschaft? Es ist die Atmosphäre eines Ortes, einer Stadt, die den Impuls zum Aufbruch gibt. In Mannheim hat Innovation Tradition. Mutige Menschen, die vorangehen, mal einzeln, mal als kreative Gemeinschaft. Dafür braucht es Offenheit für das Neue, für die anderen. Die Aufgeschlossenheit einer Stadt im Herzen Europas. Junge Talente werden zu Gründerinnen und Gründern, die sich gegenseitig inspirieren, vernetzen und das Stadtbild gestalten. So sind auch einmal Traditionsunternehmen und Global Player Mannheims entstanden, indem sie Weitblick bewiesen. Zahlreiche Mannheimer Forschungsinstitute eröffnen neue Perspektiven, während die nachhaltige Weiterentwicklung der Infrastruktur den Weg in die Zukunft weist. Dieser Innovationsgeist findet seinen Ursprung in der lebendigen Geschichte der Stadt. Ob Fahrrad, Traktor oder Raketenflugzeug. Mannheim ist die Wiege der modernen Mobilität. Hier wurde das Automobil erfunden, eine Innovation, mit der Bertha und Benz die Welt veränderten. Getragen von Karls Ingenieurwissen und Berthas Tatendrang leiteten sie das Zeitalter der Mobilität ein. Bertha Benz absolvierte die erste Fernfahrt und gilt damit als erste Autofahrerin weltweit. Ihr Mut stieß schon vor über 120 Jahren eine geistige Bewegung in der Gesellschaft an, die sich bis heute fortsetzt. Bertha und Benz zeigten, dass andere zu inspirieren der wichtigste Motor für den gemeinschaftlichen Fortschritt ist. Seit 2011 zeichnet die Stadt Mannheim mutige und herausragende Persönlichkeiten mit dem Bertha und Benz-Preis aus. Willkommen in der Innovations- und Gründerstadt Mannheim.
Welcome to the presentation of the Bertha and Benz Award 2020. I'm Constantin Schreiber. I'm a host of the Tagesschau and I'm hosting this award ceremony. We have just seen a video about brave people who lead the way, and today we present an award to a particularly brave person. She did something extraordinary. She just went into a car and drove away. For us, this is something very trivial, but in her home country, in Saudi Arabia, it is something she was sent to prison for. She made a video of herself driving a car and
أهلاً معكم لوجين AlHathloul. أنا الآن في طريق القويس.
She just sat down, put on the camera and described how she just drives along the highway. And in the end, you can see that she says that she's looking forward to what is going to happen next. We know what happened. She was arrested and detained. But she had a large impact. Since 2018, in Saudi Arabia, women are allowed to drive cars. And she had a great impact on her. Some people consider her one of the most influential women in the Middle East. Many people are now turned against her, the royal family, the government of Saudi Arabia, and they hoped that with detaining her, they could make her be in silence forever. But they didn't achieve that goal. Just let me tell you some things. We are all affected by Corona, this presentation too. We only have some people who are joining us live today, but in the digital world, all the world can watch the ceremony. We have a stream. You can watch it on Facebook, on YouTube, and in 3 languages, in German, in English, and in Arabic. The advantage of this is that you, the members of the audience, can take part. You can ask your questions to the participants of today's ceremony. You can ask these questions, and I will try to answer them or let them be answered in the course of the ceremony. The Karl and Bertha Benz Award is presented every 2 years. We now have 4 laureates. It's always about mobility. So we always bring the world a little bit to Mannheim. Lord Mayor of Mannheim, good morning. Now, we present the Bertha and Benz Prize, and not only the Benz Prize. Why is that? It is not just about engineering. but it's about the social impact of innovations. And this is the achievement Bertha and Karl Benz did together. They didn't only technically change the world, but also socially. So we commemorate this era and their impact. Now, today we're going to think about what this means for us today. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the City Council and of the jury, I welcome you to the presentation of the Bertha and Karl Benz Award to Loujain AlHathloul. The city of Mannheim presents this award for the 5th time. However, this is a premiere in 2 respects. Because of Corona, for the first time, we don't present this award in a celebration, but on TV. And for the first time, the winner can't be here to accept the award herself. This is not because of Corona, nor because of the will of the laureate, but because she can't. Ladies and gentlemen who are present here, ladies and gentlemen who are joining us online from all over the world, I'd like to extend a specially warm welcome to the sister of the laureate, Lina AlHathloul, and Jutta Benz, who is present here, the great-granddaughter of Bertha and Karl Benz. I present as a laudator a person who is very brave, engages herself against racism, Dunja Hayali. Special thanks to Constantin Schreiber, who has great knowledge about the Arabic world, and will host this ceremony. We didn't want to postpone this ceremony any longer because it is an opportunity to acknowledge the admirable commitment of Loujain AlHathloul and to show her our support. The Bertha and Karl Benz Prize unites traditions of our city. Mannheim is a city of business and innovation, a pioneering city, a place where there are many brave people who have turned their ideas into a reality. The bicycle, the tractor, the world's first rocket plane, and the car were invented here. Mannheim is the origin of modern mobility, and mobility is part of the city's DNA. Mannheim was always a city of the fight for women's rights, and they have always showed a strong commitment for gender equality. Today, we implement the European Charter for Equality of Women and Men on the local and regional level, and we are developing an action plan for gender equality. It is not only about justice. Gender equality has a significant economic and social impact. Along with Bertha Benz, many successful women left their marks on our city's development. Julia Lanz, in her company, the first tractor was built in 1921. The women's rights activist Alice Bensheimer, Else Rose Kocher, who in 1929, at the age of 27, as the first women of Mannheim and Baden, obtained a pilot's license. And Bertha Benz plays a special role. 132 years ago, she successfully completed a daring and at the time extremely dangerous drive with the car Benz Patent Motorwagen No. 1, which her husband had designed. She showed that this car was drivable on long distances, and it was because of her that this invention became popular. She was the first car driver of the world. Bertha Benz and Loujain AlHathloul are very different, but they still have many things in common. They're both passionate about free movement. Both defied conventions and are convinced that with courage and persistence we can overcome every obstacle. They're both very different, but the car is a sign of mobility in both cases. There is an international perspective to this award today. Tomorrow, the United Nations celebrate their 75th anniversary. The founding treaty, the Charter of the UN, came into force 75 years ago. Its preamble says, "We, the peoples of the UN, are determined to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, in the equal rights of men and women." Loujain AlHathloul dared to claim that these fundamental human rights, the equal rights of men and women, and the belief in the dignity, in the human dignity, were applied in her country too. She fought for against the ban on women driving in her home country. The ban has been lifted some time ago, but she is still in prison. This shows that it was not her fight against the ban that subjected her to repressions, but it was her claim for equal rights and human dignity. In October 2015, the General Assembly of the UN, who has 193 member states, signed the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And one goal is to end all forms of discrimination against all women and girls everywhere. All the countries committed themselves to these goals. One of these goals is to promote the rule of law at the national and international levels and to ensure equal access to justice for all. So according to this, Loujain AlHathloul has to be released. I would like to thank everyone who is determined to make sure that these fundamental rights are applied. I extend my gratitude to the Foreign Ministry of Germany, which this July stated in a letter that the release of Loujain AlHathloul is put on the table on the highest diplomatic level. Ladies and gentlemen, the presentation of this award is a good example for city diplomacy. And in a time of national egoisms, city diplomacy is all the more important. In 2009, the European Committee of the Regions stated in its opinion on city diplomacy that modern diplomacy is not expressed and practiced by national governments alone, and that in view of the need for dialogue, cooperation, and coordination in order to achieve the objectives of peace, democracy, and respect for human rights at all levels, closer cooperation between national governments and local and regional authorities is a natural and necessary route towards more effective procedures and strategies at multiple levels. Towns and cities play a significant role in international cooperation since they work together with other municipalities in international networks. We are tightly connected with the UNESCO, with UN Habitat, and with an agreement on direct cooperation. This connects us to Loujain AlHathloul, which in the framework of international organizations such as UNESCO and Global Contact, committed herself to a better world. Those who promote multilateralism are attacked by nationalists. Ladies and gentlemen, the Bertha and Benz Prize honors people who commit themselves to more social, environmentally friendly, and easy mobility. It stands in line with global issues such as sustainability, climate protection, and equal opportunities. It is not just an automotive award. Just look at our previous laureates. Mr. Agassi was a pioneer for an infrastructure for electromobility. José Milán in 2013 was a doctor. Mr. Diangil is a city developer who makes cities more humane. And the last laureate brought bicycles to developing countries. Loujain AlHathloul is a pioneer. She paves the way, literally paves the way. She strived for independence already at an early age. She internationally advocated for youth education and inclusion. She's one of the leading women's rights activists. She gave Saudi women, a voice and a face in a social video. Let me quote the certificate. Loujain AlHathloul, just as Bertha Benz, strongly believes that mobility is an inseparable part of every individual's freedom, regardless of their sex. She is a remarkably strong person who advocates values which we appreciate highly. Since we consider Mannheim to be an open-minded, cosmopolitan city, Loujain AlHathloul's commitment comes at a very high price. Her own mobility, her freedom, and her rights are restricted. She is suffering abuse and torture. Since 2018, she is detained. I would like to appeal to our government and to the High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy to stand up for the improvement of her prison conditions, for the immediate continuation of her legal proceedings under the rule of law, and for her release. Loujain AlHathloul, congratulations indeed on winning this award. Together with your family, your friends, and your supporters, I wish you all the best from the bottom of my heart. Stay strong. I sincerely hope to meet you soon in person, be it in Mannheim or anywhere else. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. Also, as a representative a little bit, because we're coming to the next point that is supposed to be the main point, which is the signing of the Golden Book. And you just mentioned the 4 previous award winners who have signed it as well. It's a very special Golden Book. Many cities, of course, have it, but this one is different. Yes, it is a very special Golden Book indeed, and you can see this in the certificate. Mr. Fahad, he is a calligraphist, and he created this, so it's a special moment when we have a signing that we can do together. Unfortunately, today we can't do it, and we have to wait. So this page will remain empty until Loujain AlHathloul will be able to come to Mannheim. So, of course, there's an open invitation for her to come. Yes, we hope that we can soon have her signing this book. So, a warm applause for our laureate, Loujain AlHathloul. Lord Mayor of the city of Mannheim, Dr. Peter Kurz, thank you so much. And now we're coming to the laudatory speech. A person, a woman, will hold this speech that is fitted to do this like nobody else. We know her as someone who shows what she's made of, shows her true colors in the social media as well. And I think she would be crossing quite a lot of red lines in Saudi Arabia. At the same time, we know that she has a personal relationship to the Middle East, and that is why she has a good understanding of the limitations that many women have to endure in this part of the world. A very warm welcome to the TV host, Dunja Hayali. We already had something to do with one another with the blogger Raif Badawi, and he is imprisoned because he said he spoke out and expressed his opinion. And I think you found very clear words at the time, and I could imagine that you have very clear words today as well. Well, let's see. Well, if you wish to honor a person through an award, and you are then asked to give the laudatory speech at the awards ceremony, in most cases, this is such a great honor, and it truly is for me today. I am incredibly grateful to the city of Mannheim, to you, Lord Mayor Dr. Kurz, and also to the city, to the family of Loujain AlHathloul for bestowing on me today the honor to do so. And thus I welcome all those of you here today in the audience, but of course also those of you watching us in the live stream and in the different languages, and especially, of course, one of the sisters of the laureate who is joining us live from Brussels. When you think of such an event, you might quickly imagine a typical scene, a brightly lit stage in a hall, many guests in festive attire, dignitaries, friends and family of the person being honored, drinks to welcome the guests, the bouquet of flowers, the award, and of course, the laureate. Everyone listens attentively and is usually touched by the lovely words and the speeches. The prize is ceremonially presented, and the award winner, will then usually addresses the audience with her own personal words of encouragement and gratitude. And of course also speaks to the initiators of the prize. But today everything is different, and not just because of Corona. That's why I like the way the hall was designed for today. I don't know if you can see it. It's very symbolic. In many places it is dark, but wherever it is about our laureate, there is bright light. Loujain AlHathloul, the laureate, cannot be with us today. She is to be kept in the darkness. She will not be permitted to speak to us. She cannot reach the light herself at the moment because there are others who simply do not allow it, who even fear this. So today, let us shine a spotlight on an outstanding person who simply does not belong in this darkness. Loujain AlHathloul is, as I see it, a very courageous young woman. Alongside other women's rights activists, she has campaigned for improving the living conditions of women in her country, Saudi Arabia. She has already, and you have to say this really, created something meaningful. A movement has been created, also internationally. Politicians and journalists are shining a spotlight on the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and on the situation of women there, and on the role of the state and religion in creating such circumstances. The name of the award presented today, Bertha and Benz, of course, immediately brings to mind a connection to the issuing for the first time of driver's licenses for women in 2018. And rightly so, because through her public stance, her demands, and her opposition to the rules in force at the time, which only recognized the right to drive for men, Loujain AlHathloul played a prominent role in helping promote this new mobility opportunity. This alone, however, is far from the only reason for those who want to honor Loujain with this award, because this is about so much more. This is about nothing more, nothing less than the aim of treating people of any gender alike and in a just manner, and ending male guardianship over women, finally. At the end of 2019, King Salman and his cabinet ratified legislative amendments that allow all citizens from 21 years of age to apply, for example, for a passport and travel freely. And certain administrative procedures may now be done by women themselves. Reactions to this varied. Human rights organizations commented that this was a good beginning, but that it all depended on implementing this in an authentic way. Of course, this view clashes with the conservative positions of those who fear change and cannot or will not even imagine it. In the midst of these developments, however, the person who significantly, courageously, and unflinchingly contributed to this change was imprisoned. For 2 years now, Loujain AlHathloul has been held in a Saudi Arabian prison, cut off from the outside world. Occasionally, the international press still reports on it, mainly about how the actual charges remain unclear, thus leading to speculations regarding the possible consequences, ranging from her release to her execution. Despite describing this in a matter-of-fact way, who can really imagine the emotions these speculations must have created with Loujain and her family? And of course, they still do. The person at the vanguard of change is not necessarily the one to win applause, not even in a democracy, and most certainly not in a dictatorship or a very strictly religious monarchy, and especially not when others feel threatened by her. Her trial was supposed to start this year, but due to Corona, it has been postponed. Was this necessary, or was it just for the benefit of those who think that Ms. AlHathloul is exactly where she belongs? Unfortunately, we will probably never know. In her real world, and that makes it our real world too, signing petitions and publicly expressing her opinions about her goals was sufficient for her, for instance, to be detained several times and, among other things, to be prohibited from contacting her family. Expression of opinion led to isolation. And all this despite the fact that the driving ban for women has been lifted. Loujain herself cannot benefit from this achievement. In prison, there are no cars. After her imprisonment, the government started a massive, they say, smear campaign to portray these women as traitors. The goal is, of course, clear. This is supposed to oppress their peaceful activism with which they have publicly revealed and denounced human rights violations. This reversal of perpetrator and victim role is cheap and possibly expensive at the same time because it can cost human lives, possibly the human life of today's laureate. Dozens of people are executed in Saudi Arabia every year, many through gruesome public beheadings. And all of this seems disconcerting to us here in a Western democracy, for sure. But we should also be glad, grateful, and sufficiently humble that considerable steps towards justice between the genders here have already been taken. And not just those steps. It really makes me feel ashamed to see people lamenting an alleged lack of free speech or even the alleged existence of a dictatorship when I look at the determination and strength of Loujain AlHathloul as well as her readiness to face the consequences of her own courage. These claims of a dictatorship fly in the face of reality. Those who claim this or walk around with a gallow at a protest here and want some politicians dead, they should look at the situation of today's laureate and think twice before making accusations about an alleged dictatorship. Taking a broader view is often quite beneficial to question yourself, your own expectations, your own demands, your own grievances, to reflect and gain perspective. It's not seldom to see the arrogant view of the West looking at the Arabic world. Look at how they're treating women, look at this, look at that. Oftentimes, we forget that the greatest changes in our own great country did not happen so long ago either. Women have had the vote since. Women have only been allowed to open up a bank account by themselves since. Women have only been allowed to freely exercise their provision since. Women have only been allowed to drive since. Rape within marriage only became punishable by law since. Well, not that long ago. Don't get me wrong. I, being the impatient person that I am, would wish for a country like Saudi Arabia with all its potential to have progressed more by now as well. But it is an arduous journey, and those who are undertaking it do not need our arrogance nor our hubris. They need our support so that they can continue to have the courage to stand up, show their true colors, and actively take a stance against the system which might punish resistance even with a death penalty. And of course, this support needs to be asserted vehemently on a political level as well. It is, of course, the old dichotomy, it's the old dilemma, change through trade or change through sanctions. Does a country like Germany, with a legacy of our history clearly visible for us, need to draw clear boundaries when it comes to economic cooperation with authoritarian and totalitarian systems? Politics, economics, human rights? How does this fit together? And when are we willing to sacrifice one for the other, possibly? Of course, change takes time, especially if it is to be enduring. My dad always said, a country like Iraq, the home of my parents, you cannot impose a democracy from one day to the next. You have to involve the people, have to help them get accustomed to freedom. Freedom means responsibility. Most of all, it means autonomy, it means self-reliance, and it is, of course, the protection of minorities. It needs rules that are backed by a broad majority, and this majority needs to support them, needs to be willing to accept them in any situation. And all of this is always connected to light and shadow. Loujain AlHathloul contains both within herself, but today is exclusively the day of the spotlight. The fate of this young woman must not be forgotten. A woman who wants nothing but justice, who did nothing to harm anyone, who simply wishes to live a life free together with other women and men in her country. One can only be incredibly humbled by this, and I most certainly am. Because the strength of this woman shows the weakness of her country, or rather the government, and drags it into the spotlight today. There's a sentence about a club in Berlin: what happens in Berghain stays in Berghain. This sentence, unfortunately, is also fitting for Saudi Arabia: what happens in the kingdom stays in the kingdom. And this has to be ended. Someone who defends human rights in this country cannot lose their right to be human and has to feel the full force of the authorities. And this is also true for the family members of the victims. For instance, when they contact human rights organizations or journalists. And so I can only hope that this award will bring them light and no longer darkness. It might only be a crumb of comfort, but they can look at the achievements and the courage of their sister with pride and dignity. I said at the beginning, this is an immense privilege and honor to be able to address these words to all of you at the ceremony and present the Bertha and Carl Benz Award to Loujain AlHathloul. I conclude with the urgent plea that very soon Loujain AlHathloul may be free and together again with her family, and that everywhere in the world she, along with anyone who is fighting for freedom and justice, may receive great recognition. Of course, with the energy and the selfless determination of this incredibly remarkable woman, we probably have to assume that her powerful commitment is far from over. May she receive every conceivable, legal, non-violent, and meaningful support for her journey. Ladies and gentlemen, here in the audience, those at home in front of the screens, wherever you are, and of course, dear family of the laureate, the Bertha and Carl Benz Award of the City of Mannheim is presented to Loujain AlHathloul.
Dunja Hayali, thank you very much for your kind words. We're going to talk about a few issues in our panel discussion, and I think you already touched upon a few topics which are important. What can we do? What should we do for Loujain AlHathloul? I hope that we're going to talk about that afterwards. So for those who are watching our stream and who would like to participate, you can send us your questions, your comments, and we're going to touch upon them during our panel discussion. Ruba al-Khali is Arabic means the empty place in a city, an empty place. It's about deserts, and these are places which are so empty that even the people living in the desert don't touch this place. It is also a symbol for Saudi Arabia. Sand is the material of the artist we're going to watch now. She's a sand artist, creates pictures and atmospheres, and she's going to take us on to a journey from Mannheim to the world of Loujain AlHathloul in Saudi Arabia.
Die Preisträgerin Loujain AlHathloul.
The laureate Loujain AlHathloul behind bars. It is a powerful picture. Thank you very much to our sound artist, Miss Frauke Menger, for this emotional journey. I already told you that we're going to talk about some aspects on the situation of women in Saudi Arabia, on the changes, and on what we can do here for her. We're going to talk about that apart from Lord Mayor Mr. Kurz and Dunja Hayali. One of the sisters of Loujain AlHathloul is joining us live today from Brussels, Lina AlHathloul.
Live from the Belgian capital, Brussels. AlHathloul. Hello, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Would be for Lina. How is your sister?
How is your sister?
Visit, Loujain had to go on a hunger strike for 6 days to be able to have a visit from my parents. Before that, my parents were not allowed to see her for 3 months.
هل هناك أي إمكانيات لتواصل مع
Is there any way in order to communicate with her in prison?
هل هناك أي
There a possibility to communicate with her in prison?
For now, the contact is cut again after the last visit, which was 3 weeks ago.
الشرطة ألقت القبض عليها؟
The police has arrested her in Dubai, in the UAE. Is that correct?
Saudi Arabia.
Ich möchte noch einmal erst einmal ganz herzlich
Thank you once again for this short information on her and how she's doing at the moment. It's a bit complicated with the question with the languages. Let's ignore that. Lord Mayor, I would like to ask you something. You found very good words about not looking away, about committing yourself to the cause on a high diplomatic level. Why is it so difficult, especially when it comes to Saudi Arabia? As Ms. Hayali stated before, we always have to consider what the strategy is. Do we induce change through trade or through sanctions? So we need to look at traditions and on how concretely do we put our own economic interests aside in order to defend human rights. In the course of the last years, there was a change towards a trend that we do not put aside human rights when it comes to economy. 75 years ago, the United Nations were founded, and they are the symbol of these values of human rights and so on. So this anniversary is a chance, an opportunity to think about these values and how we're going to defend them. I don't know how exactly we have to talk about them, address them, but we need to address them, and we need to use all the opportunities that are presented to us. When we thought about whether we would bring someone here, an international laudator, people didn't really want to get involved. People didn't want to take a clear position on that case against Saudi Arabia. You're intrigued, Dunja.
So you're quite interested in this question. Would you like to take this on? Well, of course, as a journalist, it is clear to me that the words have to be chosen wisely in such a laudatory speech. Still, as a journalist and as a citizen of this country, you are somewhat freer than if you were a politician. But of course, it is a fine line. I thought about it, and for me, I wanted to reach the family and the sister and Loujain, and of course I didn't want to create any more difficulties for them, and so of course that is quite a balancing act. It's not that easy. But still, I would like to ask Lina AlHathloul and ask her about the situation in Saudi Arabia. For many of us, of course, a little bit of a black box. So we hear some fragments here and there from the country, but it's hard to really build the puzzle. Lina AlHathloul.
Lina, how did the condition of the Saudi women change in the past few years?
So I think what's really interesting to see is that now in Saudi Arabia now is what the West would think about them, and so it's all about being legitimate. And the problem is the case of women in Saudi Arabia and their situation is not better now, and their aim is just to give a good image, but not really fulfill the new reforms in Saudi Arabia. For example, what they say is that now, okay, women can drive, but the ones who have been fighting for it are behind bars. They say that now women can have a passport and travel alone, but at the same time, they made a new law, which is disobedience law. So the male guardian can call the police and say that my daughter or my wife left the house without me accepting it. So we have really a different situation of what the people think what's happening in Saudi Arabia abroad and what is really happening in Saudi Arabia. And what is worse than this is that before 2015, before the new crown prince, we knew where the red lines were. So Jane, when she did this act, she did it to change things. Now the problem is we don't know what the red lines are. For example, there are concerts, but some women have been imprisoned because they were not decent enough during the concert. So it's even worse than before as it's becoming a police state now.
Ja. Das genau ist das, was man heute.
Yes, that is exactly what we feel here today as well, that at the time it was clear cut what's forbidden and what's not. And it's quite interesting to hear this from her, both things actually. On the one hand, we see, if you just look at it superficially, little steps towards change. It's a little goodie to say, oh, look, we're opening up, so please stay in contact with us. But what she is describing is exactly the other the negative side. New situations have emerged, and so it's just cosmetic, really. And I know it similarly from my family's home in Iraq under Saddam Hussein, the terrible dictator. At least we knew what we could do and what we couldn't do. The rules were clear, and then it kind of watered down, and it was a great insecurity, and nobody knew what we were supposed to do or not. I would like to continue to talk to you. It's a very important point when I talk to friends from the region. It's a cultural imperialism question mark. Of course, you have, you're quite proud and you say, we have the human rights and you don't have them. Very simply said. So the question, what is support, what is helping, and what's a certain arrogance that towards these societal structures? Where is the boundary? Well, I think it's a flowing boundary. It depends on who says it. So the sender is quite interesting, and of course the receiver of the message as well. As I mentioned it, I am an impatient person. When the Arabic Spring started, there was a lot of arguing with my dad, and I say, now it's starting. And I really had to learn in the discourse that it could only be possible step by step. But what I also tried in the laudatory speech to express is this arrogance and this hubris from the West in many parts. I think it's very problematic, because what we should do instead is people like Loujain or her sister and other people there, we should listen to them, and then you will learn what they need. What they need might not be what we think we know they need. So You just mentioned the values that we stand for, allegedly. I mean, we don't really have to look very far to be able to say in Europe, in the EU, when it comes to human rights and the values, suddenly this has become something that is apparently negotiable. So we should look at ourselves before pointing to others. Before we go to that, I would like to ask Lina, because of course she has the view from this Black Bloc Saudi Arabia, and maybe especially looking at the destiny of her sister. What's helping and what's not helping? Is such an award, does that help you? Or do you say, well, maybe it creates new difficulties?
So maybe to answer this question, I have to explain how things are going now in Saudi Arabia. So these women, when they were imprisoned, they didn't have any charges for 10 months. What happened is that the media was labeling them as traitors, was saying that they're spies, etc. So they really wanted them to be hated by the people, and they wanted them to be forgotten. And these people are the elite of Saudi Arabia, who are trying to change things and who managed actually to change things. So I think that the best way to help them is to do exactly what the Saudi authorities don't want you to do, is to be remembered, to be thanked, and to be encouraged in these changes. So exactly like this prize is doing. So thank you for this prize, for the Mannheim city for this prize. And most importantly is that at least it gives also other Saudi women the courage to thank Loujain also, because they were really scared about showing any kind of support to Loujain and the other women. So having this international prize really makes them believe that change is possible within the country.
Ganz herzlichen Dank für diese Einschätzung.
Thank you very much. And I think it's also an appeal. I would like to touch upon some questions from our audience. One question is one I wanted to ask myself, actually to all the members of this panel discussion. If a society excludes women from public life or from many areas of life, can the society be successful at all? No. And maybe this is the driving force of change. When we think of a change through, so if you think what is leading to the future when it comes to sustainability, to better social structures, this also applies to Saudi Arabia. And I think we don't only touch upon values, but it is also about the future. What will the future look like? And it also is also about the economic future. If a country discriminates on half of its population and excludes them from public life, it isn't ready for the future. And I think that this will become clear to every country at some point in the future. I'm optimistic there. So I would like to ask Dunja something, because one member of our audience asks you a question. He would like you to make a statement on what you think about the status of women's rights. Are they developing further, or is there a regress? So fear of change is something very human. We all carry that in us. But as a government, as a state, we need to do the step into the future. We need to be brave. Not only when it comes to women, but only when it comes to people with migration background, with a different skin color, with handicaps, and so on. Everything that includes people which have a potential actually backfires in the end. This is true for societies, for companies, and for actually every area of life. When it comes to women's rights, we see progress in Europe and all over the world. There is some movement, but for me personally, this movement isn't happening fast enough. Just have a look at the US. We talk about racism a lot, but many people and friends tell me who live in America that sexism is one of the largest problems there. So we tend to only look at the Arabic world, but it's not so bright here as well. So the fight for the female cause is not possible without men, and I'm very grateful for all the men who fight along us. Women's rights doesn't mean that we want any priorities, any privileges. We just want to be treated like everybody else. I've got another question from one of our audience, from Alia and AlHathloul. Are you actually support from Arabian countries?
To get any kind of support publicly from any other countries, especially given the situation in the Arab world now. We have not gotten any public support from Arabic governments, but we also have to insist on the fact that Arabic people give us so much support, and they tell us that what's happening in Saudi Arabia is they feel it in their own countries as well. So I think I want to thank all the Arabic people and all the people who have been giving us so much support from the beginning.
Auch das haben hoffentlich sehr viele Menschen jetzt gesehen.
I hope very many people saw this and heard this. I would like to connect to the culturally imperialist attitude. What I always think about, and what I'm really asking myself, especially looking at Saudi Arabia and other countries in the region, are we using double standards here? Quick question to the two of you as well. I always remember Afghanistan. If you compare it, not the economic situation, but when you look at women and minorities and I mean, Afghanistan is not that much worse than Saudi Arabia in many ways. In Saudi Arabia, of course, we have economic ties there and we trade with them. And in Afghanistan, we had a war. How come? And what is our responsibility as creators in the media? I wanted to ask you that exact question. How come? That's the interesting question. How come we report about Syria much more than the Yemen? How come that Iraq suddenly became this place where there was so much debate? It was, of course, about the oil, not about the fascinating culture. And that's a point that I really criticize. There are many places where I think this is bigoted, because we see at where do we need the economy, where do we need the trade, where can we make deals, which country is economically important to us. Look at China, especially right now. Look at Russia. And it isn't simple, or at least I can't imagine it is, as a politician, to always stand for what the federal government of Germany stands for right now. I mean, I mentioned the historic legacy of Germany, but sometimes I would wish for some more courage and sometimes more pressure. But of course, it's easy to say this from the comfort of this seat. Yes, that's a very reflected way of looking at it. I have to admit that I think a bit more radical oftentimes, but then the next step is thinking about, if it was me, these are the forces that you might have to consider. But of course, if you stop contact, are you winning something with this, or are you harming the people in the country because you have no more influence? You can't strengthen the opposition or freedom fighters, rebels. It's quite interesting how the media looks at and portrays certain groups. It's not always right. And that's what I mean by balance. It's not easy, but this is where the politician sits. Thank you for the segue. But it's true, for me, it's also a question, if I'm, saying this, are you not supporting people and say we have to stay in the contact? Well, of course, we learned that stopping the conversation will not help, basically, which does not mean not addressing topics that are important to us. And I think we should. I think both is important. So this large dimension of our society to the outside, empathy, understanding the situation, as with the countries that we have diplomatic ties, economic ties, other ties, but also with the people there in the countries and the plurality. No country is monolithic, and understanding it is one dimension. The other one is our own plurality in the situation. The same way that we did it today, use that, seize the opportunity. So the government may be acting for good reasons the way it does, but we think it's important to shine a spotlight on the human rights situation on one specific case. And that's important, of course, towards the interior. It's also important to shine a light on this and create movement. And of course, it's being seen. So that's why we have the opportunity to express ourselves differently than maybe in the current situation of a government. But of course, it's a very strong symbol of the city of Mannheim. I think it's great, and Germany can also focus on certain things. But of course, we are in the EU, we are also Europe, and so what we would wish for, and that's really a wish that is often unheard, to speak with one voice, because what does it help if Germany increases the pressure maybe with sanctions? There's another country from Europe and says, well, of course we will take on that deal. And of course it can't work like that. Yeah, so gas becomes cheaper.
Now we have a question from a member of our audience. Lina AlHathloul, what do you wish what Europe should do?
What is important to know is that silence does not help. The first months when Loujain was arrested, she was being tortured, and we didn't know this. We were silent because we thought that silence would help her. So we didn't ask for any help. We didn't reach to anyone thinking that this was the right strategy. Then we found out that Loujain was being tortured. She was being tortured by Saudi officials, and we didn't even know where she was. So once we found out this, we started talking. And we started asking for governments and people and NGOs to put some pressure on Saudi Arabia. So now what we're asking is that G20 is soon, and they have to speak up. They have to ask Saudi Arabia to release these activists without whom Saudi Arabia cannot change. It cannot be a top-down process of change. People in Saudi Arabia have to have their voices heard. So what we're asking Europe and what we're asking the international community is to talk about Loujain, to talk about these women rights activists, and to ask for their release whenever they have any exchange with Saudi Arabia.
Wir sehen Sie als junge, moderne Frau.
You are a young modern person who lives in Brussels, works there. You are from Saudi Arabia originally. Are you sometimes afraid that this family story is going to come back and haunt you? How do you feel about it?
So in Arabic, you're a liberal woman. And how is the situation for you? Are the difficulties with your family, do they change your life?
Difficult for the whole family, because once they arrested Loujain, they put all the family on a travel ban. So it's very difficult for us to feel safe or to kind of know what the risk management is, what we should be doing, what we can't do, because the aim, as we know, is to release Loujain and not make them change their mind and not want any discussion with us. But the problem is that Saudi Arabia has been silent from the beginning. We cannot talk to them. They never answer our requests. So we had to reach out to the international community. And now living in Brussels, I'm happy I'm abroad so that it's one more voice for Loujain, because in Saudi Arabia it would have been impossible to ask for anything.
Wir nähern uns so ein bisschen dem Ende auch.
We're coming to the end of our discussion, but I would like to highlight some of the issues we've already discussed. You only briefly talked about something at the beginning of our award ceremony, that there was some adversaries when it became public who was going to be the laureate. We had two kinds of reactions also in the last few days. It is what Dunja Hayali talked about in the laudatio, that people saw us or Loujain as a traitor. These are people who emphasize the international relations, the political dimension, and they then use the symbol of traitor. And unfortunately, in the last few years, there have been several verbal attacks we have to deal with. So if you present an award to an Arabic woman, there are people who ask, what does this have to do with us, and so on. So you are very cautious in your statement. So there were conservative Muslim people who criticized this laureate, and also right-leaning populists. Did you think that these reactions will be there? Yes, I did. Oh, I don't like the expression of conservative Muslim people, because I know a lot of conservative Muslim people who are righteous, who are open-minded, and so on. So this is something different. It's the people who are on the extreme right, the populists, who are on that side. So I don't like this expression of conservative. So I don't like it when they're put on the same side as the populists and the right, the extremists. So how would you call them actually? What is an expression you would choose in that case? I would choose an expression like fundamentalists. For me, that's an important thing. Whatever you do, it is wrong. This is a very brave young woman. She stands for everything we have in Germany, what we take for granted. And then such a person is attacked. What for? Why? What is the aim of that? Is only destructive. We should encourage these people, support them, do everything they need for them. I listened very closely to what Lina said. Thank you very much for joining us from Brussels. I think this is a very important, clear sign, and it should show us once again how privileged we are, what advantages and privileges we have, and that we should be grateful for what we have. And we should stand up for what is really important and not just do silly comments in social media. It really drives me crazy. I think that the majority of people agree with you, and we all, of course, too.
Maybe just to finish off, because I think it was quite an interesting final question to you. How do you continue from the view of the city of Mannheim? Will you continue to be involved here? Will there be further campaigns or a follow-up where you say this is a topic that we won't cave in? Well, precisely. Of course, every award really means commitment. You are starting a relationship, and of course we were asking ourselves, are we doing something good? And we thought that yes, it is useful to draw attention to this, and of course more prizes have come looking exactly at this aspect. So we would we see this as a continuous relationship, and furthermore, in different areas in the region we are active with precise projects. For example, in Western Jordan, we have an active connection from the Ministry for Cooperation with the women there, and so this award is really embedded into something that we see as our vision, which is assuming global responsibility. And so in a broader sense, there is a follow-up as well. Maybe just something optimistic to very current numbers. 75 years of the UN, the Bertelsmann Foundation made a survey. We talked about the dark side. Of course, those in the social networks, 85% of the Germans think that the situation of the people in the world is improving through international cooperation, and 75% think that in the short term, implementing human rights is something that is more important than one's own interests. So quite positive. That shows me something that I really believe in, is that what you read in the social media is definitely not what people think and how people live. At least that's that's my conviction. Luckily. Dr. Peter Kurz, thank you so much. Dunja Hayali, thank you for coming here, for discussing, and of course a great thank you to Lina AlHathloul for joining us from Brussels.
Thank you very much.
Salama, we thank you. You speak better Arabic than I. How dare you? Ah, well. What can I say to this? It's a little rusty because, of course, I'm here most of the time after, just crawling through the desert sand for years. So now I'm not there anymore a lot. So this ends this great event. I thought it was amazing that we could honor this great woman, that we could talk about this topic, and I sincerely hope that the social media can do something valuable here to really spread these important voices and important messages, maybe beyond our city and our country's borders. So dear audience that has joined us live and here, thank you for participating, and have a lovely Sunday. Thank you so much.